This is a story of an unconventional road trip. On September of 2020, my wife and I drove our Tesla more than 1,000 miles from Minnesota to Colorado, pulling a 16-foot camper trailer the whole way. We attracted a lot of attention along the way and questions about the trip after we returned home. We hadn't really planned on making a video, but have decided to give it a try. After I owned a Tesla Model S for 3 years, my wife wanted one, and we bought a Model Y with a trailer towing package. We knew that it was capable of pulling our 16-foot Airstream trailer. The trailer was 3 years old, and we had towed it out to Burning Man after being invited by our son. We used a pickup truck for that trip and found the trailer was comfortable even in Nevada during the summer. The trailer attachment setup on the Model Y is everything fit tightly under the bumper. This includes the receiver, the attachments for safety chains, and electrical connections. The Tesla Model Y has a trailer mode that should be enabled whenever a trailer is attached. The trailer mode disables or restricts certain vehicle functions, including self-driving features, but the cruise control still works. The adventure started with a test drive from our cabin south of Grand Rapids, Minnesota. It was a 160-mile drive from our cabin to our home west of Minneapolis, stopping once along the way to charge. The test drive went smoothly, and we arrived without any trouble. After that successful test, we decided to take the cross-country adventure to Boulder. We'd previously used my Model S to make that trip in a single day, but with a trailer in tow, we just decided to spread the trip across 3 days. There were many RV parks along the way, so we decided where to stay as we traveled. We packed food for the trip and made other preparations, assuming that we would do limited shopping along the route due to COVID. The inside of the trailer remained decorated with 60s posters from our Burning Man trip. Our route took us south from Minneapolis to Des Moines and west through Nebraska into Colorado. We stayed on interstate highways to get sufficient charging from Tesla superchargers along the way. Under ideal conditions, the Model Y has a range of about 320 miles, but pulling a trailer at highway speeds cut that by 2/3. If we had more than 120 miles between superchargers, we would slow down to 50 miles an hour to save energy. Our first stop was in Albert Lea, Minnesota. I detached the trailer and backed the car into the stall to charge. After that first stop, I found that I could generally leave the trailer attached. Either we found a charging stall that accommodated a trailer, or we could take up to 3 stalls where no other Teslas were charging. Charging time is often thought of as a downside to electric cars, but those were some of the highlights of our trip. Occasionally, we'd relax in the trailer for 45 minutes or so that it took for charging, but we often spoke with all sorts of folks that noticed and were curious about what we were doing. That frequently attracted other Tesla owners who were also charging their cars. One young couple hoped to build a tiny home on a flatbed to live in as they traveled the country. But until Tesla develops larger capacity batteries, any trailer larger than the smallest Airstream, weighing 3,500 pounds, would have very limited range. We stopped for the first night at the Timberline RV Park just west of Des Moines. On the second day, we only drove about 260 miles to a KOA near Grand Island, Nebraska. The sunset that evening displayed an orange glow above the cornfields on the western horizon that we realized was caused by smoke from the wildfires in Colorado. At the KOA, we were able to get 240-volt, 30-amp service at our parking space. So leaving the car plugged in overnight, fully charged it by morning. On the final day, we drove the rest of the way to my daughter's house in Boulder, which was 440 miles. Our first stop was Gothenburg, Nebraska, and the next was Ogallala, Nebraska. The battery was down to 7%, but we had lunch while the car was charging. An hour later, it was charged, and we headed off toward the Colorado border. We missed an exit off of I-80 as we entered Colorado, which was somewhat stressful since it was the longest stretch between supercharging stations. But we continued to another supercharger on I-80, and then headed south to resume our route on I-76 in Colorado. We arrived at our daughter's house in Boulder a little after 8 p.m. It was still light out, and our grandchildren were up still, so that was great. We parked off an alley next to the garage where the trailer could remain, and we could plug in both the car and the trailer. Backing the trailer was a challenge, since the rearview mirror and the rear camera are blocked by the front of the trailer. The side mirrors helped some, and I also needed hand signals from someone behind the trailer. After spending a week in Boulder, we were on the road again, on a road trip up to a cabin near Rocky Mountain National Park. There were some steep grades with 2,500-foot elevation gain. The Model Y never hesitated and actually had remarkable acceleration with the trailer going up steep grades, although it did increase the consumption from the battery. My son-in-law took the video as he followed in his pickup truck. But we arrived at the cabin with energy to spare, and after being there, we left the trailer out in Colorado for our daughter's family to use and for our use out west. At some point, we will make the return trip with it. We were glad that we tested out the Model Y as a tow vehicle for the road trip. It had plenty of power and handled well. I rarely had to use the brake, since letting off the accelerator pedal initiates regenerative braking, which is effective in slowing the trailer. I considered renting a pickup truck for the trip. A pickup would have made it easier with fewer stops and less planning required. We had the time, however, and found the process interesting. We drove about 1,000 miles out to Boulder when, without the trailer, the energy used would have taken us 2,800 miles. Despite all the charging, we only paid $77.43 total at superchargers. The cost to charge the car was several $100s less than gas or diesel, and we caused far less air pollution. And as batteries continue to get stronger, EVs will become great vehicles for towing recreational trailers. We also met a number of EV owners who were curious about what we were doing. Thanks, and if you like the story, please consider buying yourself an electric vehicle. They are already the best passenger car choice and will soon replace gas and diesel in larger vehicles.